these psychopaths that are already in the top, 0.1%, they think that they've been bestowed this gift from God himself because they are the chosen ones, the enlightened ones, and they need to steer humanity through evolution of consciousness or revelation of the method or what have you to create this new world, the new world order.
Welcome to the Propaganda Report. This is Monica Perez.
And I'm Brad Winkler.
Today's guest I've been super excited to talk to. He is a podcast host of Conspiracy Theories and Unpopular Culture, website publisher of IlluminatiWatcher.com, and top 5% Amazon author of The Dark Path. Our guest today has long been on the leading edge of conspiracy theories surrounding the elusive Illuminati and its infiltration of the entertainment industry. Using examples of familiar pop culture and works of entertainment, he speaks and writes about the occult from a unique perspective that seeks to understand the big agenda while helping others along the way. We are super happy to welcome Isaac Weishaupt to the show today. Hey, Isaac, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. How you guys doing?
Very good. I'm in California, so there's a lot of smoke. It's okay today, but it's a little annoying.
I'm in Utah. I get all the after effects of your guys' smoke, so we
yeah.
we deal with the smoke too.
The droughts, and it's awful. One thing that I wanted to ask you is how long you've been doing this and kind of what got you interested, and then I want to ask you some big picture stuff about what's happening right now.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. So I'm a one-man army. I just kind of do my thing. I'm not, like you said on the thing, top 5% Amazon seller. That's legitimate. I've been selling a lot of books and I do it through my own sort of means. I started blogging in 2011. What got me into this was, this is a long sort of winding tale, but basically I grew up in the 80s and 90s, interested in, all these sort of X-Files type shows. Then I read Bill Cooper's Behold a Pale Horse in 2002, and I found that to be super intriguing. A couple years later, I see David Icke's Freedom Road on VHS tape someone let me borrow. No clue what he was talking about. I had to watch it 100 times, you know what I mean? I was like, this guy's out in left field. What's he talking about? Aliens and penis statues, And so that was from the time I watched Freedom Road to the time I really started digging in, it was probably another 5 or 6 years, and I read David Icke's Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. And that's when I was really blown away by some of the ideas there. And I'm a little different than most truthers in the sense that, I'm the first one to, hate other truthers, because, sometimes people, they get behind stuff and, there's no truth to it. So I kind of fact check people like David Icke, for instance. I don't believe everything he says, but it's fascinating, and
yeah, sometimes he goes a little too far for me. And then, of course, like any conspiracy theorist who on the judging end, the buying or the selling, that's me and he are both conspiracy theorists. I have to wonder, is he an inside job? Is he a honeypot? What's going on with that guy? Stay away or embrace. Yeah. And then you start getting into the Q stuff, and it's Trump's getting away with a lot just because Q says he's secretly Batman.
Yeah, and I'm actually doing a big QAnon expose of sorts, kind of research, because let me finish my background here so people know who they're talking to, or listening to. I started the blog in 2011. I was getting ready to start grad school, had about a year of downtime, and I was like, let me do this just for something to do, because I was just used to doing things and researching just for school, and I kind of kept that going, but I focused on conspiracy. Then in 2013, I believe I started my podcast, a YouTube channel. Things start taking off. Next thing you know, in 2016, I had about 75,000 YouTube subscribers, and long story short, they banned me. They kicked me off of YouTube completely.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that's strange. But then on top of that, because Google and YouTube are the same, corporation there, Google shadow banned me because I used to be the top search result when you would search these particular terms,
When was that?
When they shadow banned me? About 2016.
Yeah, was that 2016? Yeah.
Yeah, it was all about the same time.
the end. Yeah, but 2016 was the beginning, I think, of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it was a very noticeable. I could pull my statistics up, and you could see a clear linear. It was. I would get more and more traffic every month for like, what was that, 5 years? And then all of a sudden it plateaus and then it nosedives, and it's been down. And I've paid people tons of money to look at my search engine optimization, all that stuff, and they said, no, this is the Google algorithm. Like they're dinging you for something, but it's not related to anything you're doing besides the content. So,
right.
Big shocker there, right? But I've been making books on Amazon and Audible, and like those are very popular. And then the podcast has really taken off. And this year it's like through the roof because, as you know, 2020 is this like crazy year that everybody's questioning the official narratives, and all the mainstream media sources and the masses are starting to kind of be like, well, none of this makes any damn sense. So ironically, they're coming over to the conspiracy side of the house to find truth.
Well, this can launch us into the conversation where I am looking at that and I'm seeing 2020, the year of clear vision, you could think, and the fact that it's all coming out now. And I wonder, some people absolutely refuse to see it. I mean, it's willful blindness, in my opinion, but a lot of people are seeing the curtain pulled back. And I mean, maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse, but I'm really interested to know if you think there is something to this kind of revelation of the method, either as a way for the elite to justify themselves or even as a way for them to rob us of our innocence, kind of tree of knowledge, fall of man style.
Mm-hmm. Well, to add a little more history to my research, since I started blogging in 2011, I started reading through occult literature about various ideas, philosophies, alchemy, ritual magic, all these sorts of things, because I find these really fringy, weird things entertaining to me, because my whole shtick, my thing is I watch entertainment, films and TV and movies, all this stuff, and pop singers, and I sort of call it the Illuminati TMZ show, because I do a lot of gossip type stuff, but I focus on pulling out the occult sort of ritual elements of what's happening in pop culture, and that's primarily what my focus is. I don't get into like geopolitics too much, like it's because these are big topics. Like I don't have time to research this many things, so I kind of stay in my lane with that. In 2020, I've been sort of half, and I'm the first to doubt myself even. Like a lot of times I'm like, yeah, this sounds a little too crazy, sometimes. But to me, I think like the big picture of what we're experiencing now is the motto of the 33rd degree Freemasons, the order ad chaos, order out of chaos, as your audience probably knows already. And it's very clear to me, because this has been going on for years, where they've been gradually instilling more and more chaos into the mainstream, the subconscious, what have you, in order to have us begging for order. And there's a various reasons to support this. Like QAnon, for instance, right? You look to 2016 when Steve Bannon was the campaign manager for President Trump. He was into all these kind of weird occult fringy ideas and traditionalism, which sort of argues that they need to burn down society as it is now through whatever means, chaos particularly, so that they can rebuild it for this, what they call the golden age for these folks. They're going to create a new elite, which is, and you find themes of this in almost everything. It's these psychopaths that are already in the top, 0.1%. They think that they've been bestowed this gift from God himself because they are the chosen ones, the enlightened ones, and they need to steer humanity through evolution of consciousness or revelation of the method or what have you to create this new world, the new world order. And that's...
Well, I have to ask you, if you're bringing Steve Bannon into it and traditionalism and what it sounds like they've coined accelerationism is to burn it down, which Binkley introduced us to that term, and then the motto of kind of the Great Reset or UN or Biden is build back better. But if Bannon I mean, I always wonder where, and I hate to use this expression because now Q owns it, but where the chessboards intersect. So you kind of look at Steve Bannon, even in the most, like, even if you're super conspiracy oriented as I am, to see he seems like he is in opposition to some other kind of person at his level. But if you're talking about him being in on that, what we can call the Great Reset, accelerationism, Build Back Better, do you think they're the same force? Binkley, did you want to say something about that?
Bannon, it's interesting that you bring up Bannon. Bannon is, his mission of the past few months has been to really target China. You want to find somebody that goes hardcore China all the time, listen to Steve Bannon's podcast. He just made a music video about the CCP being the enemy, and he's a documentarian. He considers himself, he has those connections in Hollywood with Seinfeld. He has his hand in culture, like you were speaking to earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, him and Breitbart teamed up. That was their first sort of venture together, was teaming up to make these documentaries sort of attacking Hollywood with their own weapons. And they came out with a lot of sort of right-wing propaganda pieces. There's ties in there with Citizens United. And there's all this stuff. And the guy, I think his name is Bossy something. The guy who's the president of Citizens United was a longtime friend of Donald Trump. And he's the one who introduced Bannon to Trump. And there's all these curious ideas, like one of the documentaries they produced called Generation Zero. Steve Bannon was very critical of the baby boomer generation. He said they're the most spoiled, narcissistic generation ever, and the 60s was a big problem because it had these change in values that need to be undone. And this is a great crisis, and we're going to have what they call the fourth turning, which is destroying the old order to create a new one, which, you know, this fits into everything that I see with my theory that it's not mine, like I created this myself. Other people have been saying this too, but that Steve Bannon is in fact QAnon, and he's behind all this chaos.
Well, that would make
theory.
sense. But the fourth turning parallels the fourth industrial revolution, which feels like, well, the guy who did I don't know if you know how the World Economic Forum has been kind of in the front and the back of coronavirus. Like they preceded it with Event 201 in October.
Oh, yes.
And now, yeah, they're telling us about the Great Reset, and they feel very left, very liberal, very world government-y. But if you look at their mission statement, it was their 50th anniversary this year, which they renewed their mission statement. It was about basically combining the forces of business and government, and it really feels like fascism. So I almost feel like even ideologically, even the lip service they pay to ideology is merging right now.
Yeah, I think I subscribe to the theories like David Icke talks about with like the left. You get to the extreme left and extreme right, and it's sort of the same team.
Yeah.
You know, like this is all sort of wrestling and just for show. And
yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Yeah, I subscribe to that. And that's not to say that, you know, like on one hand, like also like, you know, my opinion could be wrong. Like it's just my opinion. But then on the other hand, like it's confusing. It's kind of like the police, right? Like there's some bad police out there, but like it's just like there's some bad liberals and there's some bad conservatives, but they're not all entirely bad, but there's some of them. And you can sort of witness this psychodrama ritual that we're being subjected to for them to create this new world order. And that's why I would argue like the World Economic Forum there, if you're seeing elements of like liberalism and conservatism, that's probably the way it is, because in the end, they kind of both want the same thing. And getting down to the nuances of what specific differences there are, I don't know. It's just clear to me that they're trying to create this new world order, which we've all been witness to when they say, oh, nothing's going to be the same again. It's just like they did on 9/11. Oh, nothing's going to be the same again. It's the day everything changed. It's the great reset, the new normal. And like, you know, I don't know about you guys, but back in February, March, when they were talking about the new normal, I'm like, hold on, like, what are you talking about? Like, are we just going to get through this and get back to business as usual, you know?
Because they were saying 14 days and stuff, and that's why they kept pushing it. But it does seem, I'm really curious about the ritual elements of this. I never thought of the possibility that the kind of battle that we're witnessing, what it looks like we're witnessing at the top, had ritualistic drama elements to it, but certainly the masks, the isolation, there's a lot of things that feel ritualistic about it. And then symbolism like fire and water seem to have, floods, pestilence, all seem to have some kind of biblical or apocalyptic feel to it. And I can't help but think that this has that, it is a reset. It is a new normal. It is something really radically transformative happening right now, whether we consent or not. Are you enjoying this special episode of the Propaganda Report? If you are, you might enjoy our weekday show, the Drive Time News Blast. 30 minutes of news of the day from a perspective of truth, liberty, and justice. We listen to the news and peel away the propaganda so you don't have to. It's free in the Propaganda Report feed on your favorite podcasting platform. And if that's not enough for you, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/propaganda report. There you can get a full 45 minutes of daily news from a perspective of truth, liberty, and justice. Or choose higher tiers that give you all of that, plus access to our very special disappearing patron parties, live streamed cocktail parties with us and like-minded patrons 2 Fridays every month that are always a blast. Hope you are enjoying this special episode of the Propaganda Report and hope to catch you at a patron party soon.
I agree that there is a coordinated, orchestrated component to all of this. That being said, I'm not a doctor. I don't know if this COVID thing is as bad as they make it sound. I don't know if the numbers are true or if they're rigged. You could go back and forth all day looking at studies because I've done that for months. And I finally just threw my hands up and said, there's no way to know. I don't know. We could argue this all day long. So what is true is that when you look at the idea of rituals, they require a certain amount of energy, a certain amount of theater. If you watch Anton LaVey's, I think it's called De Satanis or something like that from the 70s or late 60s. There's a documentary they had about the Church of Satan. And in the documentary, they're calling out names of different demons, which was curious to me because the Church of Satan is an atheist organization. They don't believe in a god or a devil, ironically, right? But when you dig into his the Satanic Bible, you can find why he says that. He says these are psychodramas, and you have to create the environment to alter the mood and the mind, because there's this sort of dimension of energy that these people work with. Whether you're talking about ritual magic, the occultist, to use Steve Bannon as an example, he was into this Pepe the Frog stuff that was circulating before the election in 2016. Yeah. And just to add more fodder to the ban on his Q thing, he was actually already connected into that 4chan gamer audience before Pepe the Frog, because he had some scheme making money off of the World of Warcraft folks or something. So it's almost like he took what he learned there.
Is that Bethesda? I think they were just bought by Microsoft.
Oh, probably, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he already had the hooks in for this sort of idea of I would argue, creating hyper sigils through online, these 4chan people, these gamers, and that charged up this energy for Pepe the Frog, which, that's a whole nother topic we can get into. But as far as 2020 specifically, you got this idea of the masks. And I did this whole show on the masks and the debate of whether or not we should be wearing these. Because again, it's like COVID, where you can point to 10 studies that say do it, 10 studies that say don't do it. But in terms of occult ritual, this is the means for transformation. This is the hoodwink of Freemasonry, they call this. And what the reason you wear the mask is typically over your eyes, though, not your nose and mouth, but you wear a mask for the initiate to shed their identity, and it's part of dissolution of the ego, with the idea that you subdue a lot of the senses and what we would consider the normal world in order to transition for a new initiate to arise and become this welcomed into this new world of sorts. But yeah, the mask is very, and you see this in Eyes Wide Shut and stuff like that. But the mask,
right? Their eyes, yeah, you're right.
It plays a role. It plays a role.
But they're doing that now too. They brought in goggles and I've seen documents that say start wearing goggles. Gad Binkley, what do you
Now
think?
that you say that, it is interesting that I've heard Fauci multiple times, and I'm not kidding here. This sounds like a joke, but I've heard him recommend it's okay having sex with a stranger as long as you're wearing a mask, which to me, you just mentioned, calls up attention to that movie, Eyes Wide Shut.
Yes. Yeah, he says some strange stuff, like with the glory holes and stuff.
Yeah, the
It's
glory
like,
hole thing is crazy.
What are you talking about? Like,
Dude,
and
I
think-
had no idea what that is until Binkley explained it to me on podcast, which apparently was the greatest moment in our podcast history.
It's Monica
but
discovering that, yes.
Binkley explaining to me what glory holes are.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and like, you know, it's hard. I hate being so wishy-washy about things at times, but like I really hear the different sides of the argument, because like you look to these people that are in positions of authority and you want to believe that they're the ones that have all the information and they're the experts and they know the truth, but like they can't seem to to stick with one story. They keep changing their mind, and this is what I would argue is part of sowing the seeds of chaos, because that's what when you dig into some of these ideas of traditionalism, which is what Steve Bannon would label himself, their core belief is like conventional religion, experts in science, and experts in society. These things are all flawed, and we should be embracing these other practices, which are occult practices, and they specifically call out for the breakdown of the masses of bodies, like the EU, the UN, the CDC, the World Health Organization, because they think that, like, basically we've lost our way through modernity, and like there's this true spirituality that needs to be reinstilled into this new world order.
You're kind of blowing my mind a little bit. I just have to pause for a second.
Did you say modernity?
Yeah.
Yeah, modernism. Modernity.
Okay, modernism. It just sounded like Moderna, the vaccine company that
which
Fauci
is
works
the-
with, which I think is winning out in
Which
the
is the
vaccine wars
vaccine.
right now.
So
Yeah, well, they think we've become too material, right? They subscribe to this idea of the Kali Yuga, which is like the final cycle, the final age of man, and they think that we've gone too material. We need to go back to a more authoritarian style of leadership so we can bring about this golden age where the elites, the true elites, can establish dominance. And I would argue that this is exactly what they've been talking about for a long time, with talking about the great work the Freemasons do, and you know, I lost my train of thought there.
well,
Anyway,
maybe I
go
can
ahead.
bring it back by explaining to you how what your kind of what thoughts you're awakening for me that I absolutely are totally foreign to the way I think. But what you're saying is putting some pieces together that I didn't really fit in my view of how the elite operates. I always think of them as trying to suck all the money and power to the top, to a world government, through the governments and all that. But there is a 2010 document by Rockefeller Foundation that has two-part thing that is really baffling me, but it looks like it's happening right now, which is that the nation states and those kind of organizations break down. And although the world kind of goes in lockstep, information slows down, real, like, kind of quote authority as we know it, governmental authority goes away, but the philanthropists join together and kind of run the world de facto. And I would imagine that if there are two sides of the coin, the Rockefeller Foundation will be on the opposite of Bannon, but it does sound like what you're talking about. And materialism, I keep thinking, just today I thought, I think they intentionally deindustrialized Cuba. They've always kind of been after deindustrialization, and I thought they were doing that because that's what would have been required to kind of get a world government going, because the really advanced countries couldn't be governed by the same entity as really poor countries. You kind of see that in EU, and maybe that's what they were up to. But to put a different kind of overlay on it, the way you're talking, I think I'm going to have to start, when I do my research and think about what's happening in the world, I might have to expand my mind into this stuff. It's a little hard, though. It's like, It's really, it has to change your worldview a little bit to see things this way.
Yeah, and that's why this, this is like my side gig, right? Like, I've got a day job and stuff, But like, this is quite the obsession for me, because once you dig into it, there's all these levels of truth that you can see with your own eyes, but you're trying to distinguish what's happening here. Because like you said, it's like, on one hand, we've been told forever that the New World Order, or whatever we want to call this, is this globalization and the centralization of powers. And meanwhile, now you've got this other faction where they're saying, no, we need to break them all down to restart. And it's like, well, which one should I believe in? It could be that we've got some different opinions, different philosophies, and like these people are sort of battling each other on some levels. Now, and I don't want to not give credit where credit's due. Professor Ben Teitelbaum wrote a book called War for Eternity, and I interviewed him for my podcast. And he's the one that I didn't think much of, Steve Bannon. I didn't give him a whole lot of thought until I read his book preparing for that interview. And I saw all of these occult concepts about the golden age and all this stuff and alchemy. And I said, holy crap. Like, I didn't know Steve Bannon was into all this stuff.
I didn't know that either. And he has a couple of backstories that you never hear. I think one is that he was deep in the Admiralty. Like, he was around when Reagan got inaugurated and did a botched kind of rescue operation for the Rand hostages. And then he's also tight with Kellyanne Conway and the Robert Mercer, Cambridge Analytica crowd, which is kind of cited as the anti-left, they're like the CFR for the left kind of thing. Although I do believe that stuff either is for show or it's just operates at that level. Maybe the people there believe they are on one level fighting a battle, but ultimately I do think it's all feeding up to the top. But the stuff that you're talking about, I feel like what we spend all of our time figuring out the framework for and plugging things in, our ideology, the history we learn, the science we learn, we don't learn any of that. So I imagine you have to actually, it must be like relearning fundamentals about how the world operates, the history, humanity, how many dimensions there are.
Right.
You have to start with that and then plug in the actual events.
Yeah, I mean, lucky for me, like, I wasn't great in high school. I was never interested in learning much in high school. I was always a good student, but I always did the bare minimum. But then when I joined the military, I was in the military, and I was like, oh man, I gotta go to college. This sucks. So I got out, went to college, and I gave it hell, and I got like a 3.9 GPA, and like I really.
What did you study? A's. What was your major?
I did electronics engineering with a math minor, which was a curious decision on my part, because all these people we were learning about who derived a lot of these mathematic formulas, they were all old occultists, and a lot of the names resurface when I'm doing my research on the history of the occult.
Really?
Yeah. So
I would love anything you have to say about Jack Parsons. I've always been kind
of you got how many hours you got? We can talk about
really?
Jack Parsons.
I'm sure you've done work on it. You put out so much material, like it would not be possible for me to fully survey.
Does numerology factor into all that? The math angle of it?
Yeah. There's because they believe in like what they call the Twilight language, and they a lot of this goes into like as above, so below talk, where they think, and this is a good answer to I think the first question, as far as my point of view. You got to understand their fundamental idea of how the world works, and I don't know if this is right or wrong. I've been reading a lot of quantum thought and new age kind of stuff lately, and I a lot of that resonates, and I'm like, oh, maybe they are right. But they think that the things we do here on Earth can be connected through like mental thoughts, mental emanations, focus, meditations. We can use the energy of these thoughts on some level to create changes in the universe, which is the idea of ritual magic.
But that's also the idea of prayer, right?
Yeah. Yep. Same idea, right? And it's like sort of two paths to different sort of ends. But the numerology and the numbers and stuff, that fits into a lot of their ideas on that as above, so below, with the idea that ritual dates have meaning, and they would do this to align with the cosmos on some level. It's kind of like trying to think of a good example I was just using for someone. We were talking about this. It's kind of like how the rituals work, in a sense. You have to get the mind prepped to sort of have this interface with the universe, because the universe then responds. It's kind of a Kabbalistic idea. It's like the universe kind of has its own response to it, and it's kind of hard to get into the ideas they have of this, but that's why when you look at the Book of Revelation and the Apocalypse and the events you see in there, you'll see people depicting that in entertainment and pop culture, with the idea that these folks believe it's sort of a recipe book, and if they start creating the events, it'll take on its own energy and build up momentum, and then they can bring about the end times, which sounds psychotic, right? It sounds scary, but they have a different view of the world. You know, they believe in Luciferianism. They think that God's the oppressor and Lucifer, the fallen angel, is the true enlightener of mankind, and all this stuff.
Is that what that show Lucifer is kind of conveying? Have you seen that show?
I haven't watched it. I should, but I haven't seen it, no.
I just watched a few episodes recently, the first time I've ever seen it, and that sounds to me like on my brief interaction with it to be what they are, kind of the plot, underlying plot anyway.
But it's not Lucifer as a personal anti-God, right? It's Lucifer. It's the idea that God...
It's Lucifer was thrown out of hell, and the show is, and he comes up and he's living somehow he's on Earth now, living as a human, and he's discovering his humanity. So, and there's a lot of anger towards his father that kind of make frame God as the bad guy.
But I mean, Luciferians, you said it's atheistic, right? So
no, that's so you got the Church of Satan, right? And they're like an atheist.
Oh, I see. I got
officially. The Luciferians, which isn't, as far as I know, like an organized, structured religion of sorts. It's more of a philosophy that the people that subscribe to it believe that Lucifer is sort of the misunderstood hero, and God's oppressive, and he created us to worship him, and if we didn't follow the rules, we have to burn in hell forever, and he's a real jerk. So Lucifer, or the serpent in the Garden of Eden, was here to help us and show man technology so that man can become God himself, which is what you find as the sort of end game for all of this is man through apotheosis becoming God, which is not to sound like a Bible thumper, but that's like what the Bible warns you about over and over, like with the Tower of Babel and all this stuff.
I was going to say there's like repeated fears of that or revelations of that. People say it's Mormonism. I've heard you talk about the hip hop guys. And I was thinking, I wanted to ask you about this because I saw at the Grammys, Pharrell Williams, I guess, had that song Happy. And I remember saying to my kids, oh, this is totally Satanist. And they're like, what do you mean, Mom? It's about being happy. I was like, it says happiness is the truth. Isn't that like, do what thou wilt? And then when he came out to accept the award, he said, I just want to thank the Lord. And I remember thinking, what Lord? Which Lord?
Yes. And that's where it gets a little fuzzy, because they talk about, give thanks to God and all that, but their God, as the theory goes, is Lucifer. And Pharrell, he had a line in a song talking about Hermes Trismegistus, which is a name that most people probably never heard in their whole life. And it's because he knows the ways of the occult. And that is a revered figure in the occult. It's where the Hermetic magic comes from the ancient Egyptian sources.
What is his name again?
Hermes Trismegistus? Or Hermes the Thrice Great or something like that is what that means.
I just, a couple of things on that. Somebody just tweeted at me. I was like, I'm a mom and I talk about my kids sometimes. And they're like, you just have to teach them the 7 principles of Hermeticism. And I was like, wait, I have a red flag on that. I think that's bad, right? And then I read something else that the Catholic Church was infiltrated by that like 800 years ago.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there's and that's where it gets a little odd, because some of the New Age ideas, like, they're not all entirely bad. It's just a matter of discerning at what point is it, at what point do I tap out of this? And like yoga, for instance, right? Like yoga, it's great. Get your stretch on. It's cool, whatever. People love it. But, you got to understand the occult roots of yoga, which means to union, to yoke, was to connect man to God. And that's what you'll see in all these ritual ideas. symbolically they do different kinds of rituals. They call them like Apollonian or Dionysian rituals, where you either like overload the mind so that it can be sort of subsumed by this higher God source, or you overload it, or you withdraw. So like fasting or doing drugs or drumming, getting into a rhythm, a chant, those kinds of things.
This is blowing my mind, this stuff, because
Me too.
I've done a lot of improv comedy in my life. I've over a decade, and one of the exercises, yoga is something that you do before, what some people do before to get focused, to get centered. And there's an exercise that this guy named Keith Johnstone does. He does a workshop on trance masking, which the idea is a bunch of people who are kind of in their shell. They put these masks on, and these kind of crazy looking masks, and they just transform into something else, like you spoke to a little while ago, and they become literally just insane. Like, people who were the shyest people in the world are doing craziest things you've ever seen behind the veil of this mask. And it is so much power that comes in getting people to buy in to things like that. You have so much control over them once they do that.
And those ritual sounds, like the drumming and stuff, I've noticed as, like, I saw a friend of ours is in the band Arrested Development, which is an old hip hop band with like a positive focus. That was one of the things that they prided themselves on. It was great, super funky. I really enjoyed the show. But then when my kids will walk around with really current hip hop stuff, it's so agitating that, like, if they have their phone playing it, when I'm making breakfast, I just have to turn it off. I'm thinking, this is really getting into my mind in a way that does not feel good. And I just wonder if part of that, it's not even music somehow, I think. And then I wonder if part of that is it just prepares them for messages or something. It seems weird to me.
Yeah, that's curious. Arrested Development, I bought their there was like the third CD I ever bought was the popular one they had. It was real good.
They still got it, but you're not going to see them for a long time.
Yeah. So I was a big fan of that first album they had. That was really good. But then I get into a lot of, I like the gangster rap. I like all hip hop. Like, I'm a hip hop guy, so like I like all of it. Like, even the nasty stuff that I talk about on my shows. Like, it's because I enjoy it, right? Now, to sort of add to that idea, here's an example to sort of support some of these schools of thought we're talking about. You talked about Aleister Crowley's do without wilt ideas. Mm-hmm. Aleister Crowley plays a huge part of this agenda in the sense that he was one of many in a long line of occultists that were synthesizing ideas and reteaching the masses. He wasn't the first to do it. Pythagoras was the first to do it back in like 500 BC. He kind of around all the ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, and he synthesized all the occult esoteric doctrines and then taught his initiates in his little secret society. And you've got all these people that have done it over the hundreds of years.
And he's a big math guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Pythagorean theorem. Yep. And so Aleister Crowley was just kind of like one of the most recent, most notorious ones. And that was his deal, was to incorporate all of the occult teachings from all over the world. And he actually went into, we can talk about him with Jack Parsons, because Jack Parsons thought he was going to be the successor to Aleister Crowley. Because Aleister Crowley was channeling spirits and stuff and doing all this. He was doing like the yoga and the meditation and the occult rituals and the magic. And he was the one who did the Amalantrah working, which was a ritual he performed up near where they arrested Ghislaine Maxwell. And he channeled an entity called Lamb, which means the path or the way. And this entity he drew, and it looked as a gray alien. And this is 1918. This is long before people were drawing gray aliens. And he said, I made contact with this entity, and this is what it looks like. Well, then, you fast forward, and now we're in the 1940s, and right before Parsons died, right before Aleister Crowley died, Jack Parsons, who was your godfather of NASA, essentially, he and L. Ron Hubbard were out in the desert conducting the same ritual, the Amalantra working, but they reworked it for a different purpose. They called it the Babylon working. And what they were trying to do was manifest the female goddess Babylon, which he was successfully able to do in the form of Marjorie Cameron. Now, what was curious to me was that this term Babylon, and I'm probably going way over everyone's head. Don't stop me if it gets too crazy.
Just keep going.
Okay.
I want to go back. I've read a couple of things on books on Jack Parsons, but I'm just not satisfied. I want more.
Yeah, he's intriguing, fascinating to say the least. So I'll make this brief. But so Babylon, Babylon means gate of the gods, referring to the Sumerian culture. But Aleister Crowley reworked it to Babalon, based on numerology, like we talked about earlier. And it's based on John Dee and Edward Kelly and their Enochian angel language. They were doing this hundreds of years prior to Crowley, where they thought they were talking to aliens and angels, and the aliens said, here's the language you can talk to us. So they wrote it all down on this table, and in the dimensions were 12 by 13, which is the gematria equivalent to Babylon with the A. So here's why I bring all this up, is because Crowley links into Parsons. Parsons does the ritual. Crowley says that guy's an idiot. He didn't close the portal off right. Then we get Roswell right after that, and then Crowley dies. And during this, Parsons manifested Marjorie Cameron into his life, and they thought that they were literally tasking themselves to manifest the energies of the New Age, the Aeon of Horus, which is almost by definition the world we live in. It's the age of the crown and conquering child, and everyone sort of like does their own thing, and there's no morality to consider. And so I would argue that you go back to Parsons and Crowley, and that's who you have to ultimately blame for the state of affairs today, because they being the beatniks influenced the 60s, which pissed off Steve Bannon, and now we're all in our home quarantining.
But what about somebody like Klaus Schwab, the face behind the founding of the World Economic Forum, that acts as the, let's say, tactical agent or even strategic agent of this big picture change? That I mean, is it energy that connects them? Is it a common plan? I mean, is it communicated? I feel like there's a level of the chessboard that's above those two.
Yeah, I get that, and that's some of the confusing elements of this, that it's really hard to ascertain, because we're not part of these meetings that they do at Bilderberg or Bohemian Grove.
They all go to that. Trump goes to Davos.
Yeah, so like I would argue that, and I don't know what, it's kind of like the art, like I focus on pop culture, right? So like, do the artists know that they're doing these symbols that mean this and that and the other? Like who did I just talk about? I don't watch sports. Not Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. He does all these weird symbols during like a ritual every time when he starts the game or whatever, where he's doing the 666 hand and the triangle of manifestation hand, which people confuse as Jay-Z's rock diamond. And we could tangent off into Beyonce's Black is King, which is a Disney propaganda film for aliens. But yeah, I don't know that these artists and these celebrities, I don't know that they entirely understand it all. I think at best there's some handler that knows them in these Hollywood circles. It's like, hey, if you just do this, you can sort of like manifest energy to make you better at basketball or whatever.
Let me ask you a question. These people in power, these like people way up at the top that you're speaking about, do they believe they're communicating with these aliens like Crowley did? And are they communicating with them in pursuit of what you mentioned earlier, in pursuit of becoming something else and transforming into a god? Is that their goal?
Yes.
From the individual standpoint?
Yes, 100%. And I know that's sort of a wild statement to make. I'm writing 2 alien books going in deep into this topic. I just published the first one. It's called Aliens, UFOs, and the Occult, Use Your Illusion 1. And I'm working on the second one. But yes, these if you look at, so Dr. Stephen Greer, he's out in the desert meditating, channeling aliens. He wants you to buy an app you can download to your phone where you can literally manifest the UFOs and stuff. This is called like, a certain Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind, named after the documentary there. But yeah, these occultists, and the reason I believe this is because this has been going on for a long, long time. And to me, it's nothing new. It's just sort of the modern take on this thing. And if you go back to a guy named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, he was one of the first to sort of believe in this ancient alien idea, that aliens have been here before and they left their presence known, and they sort of tweaked the DNA of mankind, and we all need to go back to the cosmos, to where our true creators are. And he did this a couple hundred years ago. And this is the same idea as you see perpetuated in science fiction. And that science fiction influences all these science nerds at NASA and rocket scientists, Wernher von Braun, Jack Parsons, all these people. L.
Ron Hubbard and Heinlein and those guys were in on it. Even George Orwell. There were a lot of those people who wrote stuff in that, on that side of the spectrum who were involved.
Yeah, and those people, they dabble in not only just like aliens and science fiction, but they start dabbling in, global New World Order kind of talk. And, H.G. Wells and Huxley and all these people connect together. And you start seeing this sort of same concept over and over, like they call the perennial philosophy, and this idea of this global consciousness and this, and it goes on and on. There's all these people that called aliens different sort of things. And when we talk about aliens, to me, that's an interdimensional entity. It's not, it's like angels and demons, right? I don't necessarily believe that there's conscious, advanced beings on another planet that come here and visit us. But I do believe through different methods, these things can be contacted from another dimension. Which is what all these occultists buy into.
Regular, widely accepted, the dominant religions in the world have that kind of element, in that you have people who can cross over from living to dead, from material to immaterial, communicate directly with personal entities from a different dimension. I mean, even just the Bible is full of that kind of stuff.
It's very interesting because whatever it is that they're communicating with, if they don't know what the true origin is, maybe they think that they do, then whatever that is has very, very powerful control over them, which then trickles down to everybody else. I'm imagining the scene from Back to the Future where Marty McFly is in 1955 and he's trying to get his dad to ask his mom to prom after having messed up their first meeting. He dresses up like a space alien, and he puts these headphones on his dad while he's sleeping, and he wakes him up with rock music, and he commands him to ask her to the prom.
Doesn't he say, "I'm your density"?
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember the exact line, but something like that. I'm just imagining the power that whoever controls these messages that are getting to them, there's where the power lies, it would seem.
Yeah. And these people are trying to purposefully contact entities. In that scene from Back to the Future, that's kind of it's kind of like an ancient alien sort of idea, where maybe they didn't understand what was going on. But the occultist, like Kenneth Grant, for instance, he was another famous occultist who took on Crowley's missions, and he started what they call the Typhonian Ordo Templi Orientis, and the whole purpose of that organization was to open gateways and to channel entities into our world, into our dimension. Now, if people think that this is all crazy woo-woo stuff, look no further than our own intelligence agencies. They've been researching this since the 40s. They were researching Jack Parsons and his occult connections, because Parsons, they heard, ripped a portal in the sky doing that Babylon working, and that created the Roswell alien crash. And then so the story goes, Nick Redfern wrote a book about this. There's a group called the Collins Elite that have been basically, I don't want to call it a deep state, sort of a deep state, a succession of people within the Pentagon that research the alien phenomenon since 47, they've been weary of making contact with entities from another dimension because they have like a fundamental Christian belief like, hey, these things are demons. We shouldn't do this. And, we were doing all these sort of paranormal men who stare at goats type studies at SRI, Project Stargate, all this stuff. And the whole time, so the story goes, the Collins Elite folks were like, hey, we shouldn't do this. We should shut this down. We think you're going to bring demons into our world. And that's the true secret as to why they can't be transparent and honest about what's going on with these UFOs. And to prove that point, if you look at Luis Elizondo's interviews of the past year or two, he's the focal point of the new alien UAP disclosure thing, working with Tom DeLonge. You can see it in his own interviews. He covertly says stuff like, oh yeah, we had a bunch of, wacky Christians that were holding back research for many years. And that's who he's talking about.
That's just interesting. Some of the stuff is dovetailing in that if you were saying how it's DNA kind of alters DNA, transforms DNA earlier on in the conversation. And then when you talk about what some of these scientists are doing that might invite demons, I mean, I would think the most, in my opinion anyway, the most concerning medical ethics question is gene editing, which, by the way, Fauci's wife is maybe the foremost medical ethicist that I know of. And so that just shows you where we are.
One of the vaccines is a gene edited. The RNA vaccine is a
yes, Inovio. I know that's the thing, is that they are starting to change the very DNA of humanity because that stuff gets passed on.
Yeah, that new RNA vaccine is a sketchy little thing to me.
That's the worst, in my opinion. But I did want to ask you, I just have this idea that, and maybe I don't know if you go in this direction, but do you have a sense, I heard you say about, which I think was straight out of the Bible, but that the goats go left and the sheep go right. And then I've noticed in the Bible, it says, eating from the tree of knowledge is the fall of man. And then I also heard you mention Alice in Wonderland, like after she goes down the rabbit hole, she's fundamentally changed. And I was listening to the Higher Side chat you did, and you were talking about Westworld and Dolores and how when she kind of woke up, she was this different kind of person. She lost her innocence. And then I had to add on, and she became, as far as I watched the show, it got too violent after a while, but she was evil. And I wonder if there is an element of when you rob people of their innocence, is there a ritualistic thing that you're familiar with where just giving them fruit from the tree of knowledge separates them from the other entity, God, or, puts them in your world just by default?
Yeah, there's something to that for sure. When we look at artists like Katy Perry, she talked about in an interview how she was going to be a gospel singer and then she sold her soul to the devil. And then look at Beyonce. She was in Destiny's Child, which was a name based upon some Bible reference. I don't know off the top of my head. And then she flips around and now she's the Yoruba goddess. She's trying to literally manifest herself as a goddess, telling her fans to worship her as the goddess, and then the mainstream media falls in line with that narrative as well.
And I feel like Miley Cyrus is the whore of Babylon, and her birth name, I believe, was Destiny.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there's something they get off on this idea of like perverting out these people, specifically if they can flip them over, because in terms of occultism, when you talk about the goats and the sheep, we talk about they call it the left-hand path, where you can sort of, I guess one way is you could make contact with the divine one of two ways, the left or right-hand path, and the right-hand path is more of like your standard socially acceptable thing, whereas the left-hand path, they subscribe to a thing they call antinomianism, where through self-deification, which is again your apotheosis, idea that man can become God, through individualism, separation from the stream of God's consciousness, through evolution of the mind and magic, and all this stuff, one can evolve themselves and embrace the dark side, embrace the idea that evil is actually good and the dark is actually light, which is a theme you see with the duality and the black and white checkered floor and the what they call the Moses pavement and the Freemasonic lodges on the floor, on the checkered floor.
Well, that makes me think about transhumanism. Is that related to this God idea? And I also wonder if you've noticed that the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is a World Economic Forum project, they talk about that its characteristic will be to blur the lines between biology and technology. Does that flow into the God thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the transhuman thing pops up in all my research. I think it's in damn near every book I've written. It's this idea that ties together all these components. It fits so nicely into it. The occultism, the ritual magic, and it's something like as simple as superhero movies, or a lot of these paranormal shows of channeling ghosts and stuff. It's all about this idea that we can use forbidden knowledge, contact with entities from another dimension in order to get this enlightenment, to evolve man into the next phase, because they want to kind of keep this thing moving. And again, when you look at like superheroes, right, like that's considered an evolved sort of transhuman thing. They're just showing you what the Hindu culture is called the siddhis, and it's like if you ever read the Diary of Yogananda, that's what he claimed he could do, is like levitate and walk through walls and all this crazy stuff. They legitimately think that through contact of, I argue, Luciferian forces or aliens or whatever, that they can achieve these ends of man becoming something greater, because it is a spiritual battle in a sense where they think we need to destroy God's creation and create a new one, a man-made new form, the transhuman. This is the same concept you see in a lot of tales, like 2001: A Space Odyssey is your perfect example, where man evolves through the alien intelligence, the monolith, and becomes the Star Child, a perfected being that's, and if you read the books, I read all 4 of the books, the way it works is, and in the second book, by the way, they have they create a second sun that's brighter than our sun. They call it Lucifer, because that's what this is all about. But the idea is that the Star Child becomes streaming bits of consciousness with no limitations, can immortal, live in the universe forever. It's just this stream of data now, and that is where I argue they want to take us through Ray Kurzweil's singularity talks and Zuckerberg and virtual reality and all this crap,
but
and avatars.
Surely it's not for everyone. Oh, sorry, Binkley. What did you want to say?
Some of that sounds to me a little bit like, again, gene editing. I've read a number of times on our show, Monica, the list of superhero-like powers that this professor at Harvard made that humans could possibly obtain with certain gene edits, and the side effects. And the one that sticks out to me is you would have unbreakable bones. It's basically the same thing as the movie Unbreakable with Bruce Willis. Is your bones are unbreakable, but the only downfall is that you might be so dense that you would sink and never be able to swim again, which is the weakness that Bruce Willis's character has in that movie as well. And you said, coming from alien technology, that theory that the aliens came down and they gene edited us to make us a slave race seems to kind of fall in line with this us gene editing other species. And like we turned a beetle that didn't fly into an organism that flies. We completely transformed it, and now we're testing a lot of this stuff on ourselves.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, and they did that with didn't Bill Gates do that with mosquitoes?
He did.
CRISPR gene editing or something?
Yeah, he created super mosquitoes. He said he was trying to get rid of malaria, created super mosquitoes instead.
Yeah, and I recall that the conspiracy theories of the COVID leaking from the Wuhan lab was a place where they were doing CRISPR gene editing in there.
Yeah,
I don't know what these nerds are doing. They're going to kill us.
Go off in all those, but I know that we were going to be very strict about the time, and I kind of want to circle back to where we started. I had the thought that I always call it QAnon, but I've heard people call it QAnon, and you're talking about Steve Bannon being QAnon, and
Oh,
That's interesting.
I wondered.
that's a good thought. I never put that together.
You just don't know, man. So I just wondered if you know, kind of where can we follow your pursuit of that? You know, you're pulling on that thread.
Yeah, I'm going to publish it on my pod. In fact, soon I'm going to have it on my podcast feed, Conspiracy Theories and Unpopular Culture. It's on, iTunes, Spotify, all the places. And I focus, like I said, I generally usually focus on pop culture and occult symbolism and how the two interact. But every now and then I'll sort of dabble into these side conspiracies. Like I did a whole, like an 8-part vaccine show where, because I didn't, back in March, I wasn't an anti-vaxxer, but I wasn't a pro-vaxxer. Like, I don't take my flu shots or nothing. And I thought, man, this is coming down the pike fast. I got to figure out, like, do I want to take this thing? And I did a genuine, neutral sort of take on, okay, here's all the ideas that the anti-vaxxers say exist. And then I sort of fact check and try to find the truth in there. And side note, I decided to write like a 80-page book about this sort of journey and research with links so people can make their own decisions. And I went to publish it on Amazon, and they wouldn't let me. They blocked it, which was funny to me. Yeah, they blocked it. And I've written maybe 8, 9 books, and they all have crazy blockable titles like Illuminati and blood sacrifice and crazy stuff. Right. And I was like, this is the one? They're going to stop this one? So,
Boy, it's what you cannot talk about. That shows what's important to them. I posted something, I tweeted. I used to never tweet about this, but I had a terrestrial radio show, and on the last show, I did think like that 9/11 was kind of safe to talk about now. Like, it's been too long. It's after the truth movement didn't get anywhere, who cares now? I think they do care about that, because my Twitter feed got all glitchy after that, and the thing that I tweeted got taken down, and it was a totally totally legit article from Off Guardian, but they still, and we were on terrestrial radio together, Binkley and I, and we got taken off when like our last show, we talked about for 8.5 years. We were on there, and just this year we got taken off. I think it was just because of talking about Event 201 in February, but we also just started letting our hair down and talking about 9/11 and stuff like that. And I think that was just like, whoa, you are not allowed to talk about this stuff. And I just think what you're not allowed to talk about really reveals not only what's important to them, but what they feel they don't completely own.
They don't want it to be in that collective consciousness that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what. And to add another thought onto that for anyone listening, the reason I got banned from YouTube was, first I did a video talking about the symbolism in a Taylor Swift music video. Nothing negative, just saying here's the occult symbolism and what it could mean, this, that, and the other. And they blocked me out of my account. And then I took some, community guidelines bullcrap, course they made me take. And I'm like, and the whole time I'm like, this is weird. Like, it's not like I'm on here saying negative things about her. I'm just saying, here's what I see in the video, right? Then, just a couple months later, I did a video about Ariana Grande, the same thing. And I go to log in the next day, and they said, you've been canceled, you're blocked, you can't ever open another YouTube channel.
Wow.
And I lost 200 videos. Yeah.
Oh, wow, because you were very popular and successful on YouTube.
Yeah, it's very strange, because I go on there every now and then, and I'll see people with similar content. And I don't understand it. Like Shane Dawson, he can talk about whatever he wants to, conspiracy related, for God knows why, but I couldn't. And it's very strange to me.
Well, someday I'm going to have to pick your brain about the Grammys. I go to the Grammys fairly regularly. I can actually have free tickets. And there's so much stuff that really looks like black mass stuff or that kind of thing. And one time I was going, and my kids say, oh, Mom, tell us anything satanic you see. And I literally walked in. I was in a suite, and I looked over the crowd before it started, and every single person was wearing glowing devil horns.
Oh, I remember that. Yes, I remember that.
It was an hour after my kids
What,
tell
you
us
didn't bring your devil horns?
they gave me some. I had them. I didn't wear them because I was afraid that I would just all of a sudden, it's like getting a chum bucket on your head, that we would all worship plankton or something.
And didn't Jack Black start that one out with a prayer to Satan too? Isn't that the same one?
Oh, that was when AC/DC started with Highway to Hell.
Oh, okay,
But
maybe that was it.
Jack Black, what I've seen him on there. I mean, there have just been so many satanic elements. So I'll have to wait until next time if you'll grace us with that. But this is not the time because the election's coming up and the year 2020 and the clarity there. I'm sure that there's just too many things that are absolutely emergent. But I'll give Binkley the last word.
I have one final question. First, I want to know where we can find your books, because I know a lot of people want to check out your books. I know they're on Amazon. Is there a website that you want people to get them from?
Yeah, so whatever's easiest for people. I got them all on Amazon. I narrated almost all the books. They're on Audible under my name, Isaac Weishaupt. If people want signed paperbacks, I have them at my Gumroad store. It's Gumroad, like bubblegum, gumroad.com/Isaac W. But yeah, whatever's easiest for the people. Doesn't matter where they get them for me.
Fantastic. And my final question is, and you could probably do an hour on this, but as briefly as possible. In your research, what is the most bizarre thing that you have come across?
Ooh, wow. That's a curveball there. Most bizarre. I mean, everything's so bizarre to me.
How about the most bizarre thing you believe?
The QAnon Steve Bannon one right now.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because I have a hard time being like just committing to it, but I'm like, everything I see makes sense here.
Well, just now they put out somebody who they fired from Citibank for running a QAnon website, and then they fired somebody who anonymously spoke about Fauci, who apparently was an inside guy. So maybe this is foreshadowing to the Q as inside job, because I was wondering, those two things, things like that with the same feeling don't come out on the same day if they're not meant to kind of send that ripple effect through the consciousness, to take Ricky's podcast name.
Yeah,
Sorry, but I'll let you answer.
Well, they were, and they were shutting down QAnon accounts on Twitter and stuff. So it's almost like you're seeing these warring factions of whose dystopian new world order is going to win.
Who's the official QAnon too? Who gets a blue check for Q?
Yeah, right. But as far as to answer the question, I would say Beyonce is the weirdest one to me, because there's so much behind her, and she was at the Grammys portraying the Yoruban goddess Oshun many years ago, and I thought it was kind of just like a shtick she did for that show. But when you watch Black is King, she's taken it to the next level, and she's telling you like she is the goddess. And when I was researching this, there's an idea that having people worship you as a goddess could create a literal goddess in some of these faiths. So I would say Beyonce is probably the strangest one to me.
Interesting. That I will now shift some of my attention to Beyonce, because I love that stuff. This has been great, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Next time I want to talk Kanye. Yes, thank you so much, so much. I know you're super, super busy, and hopefully we'll follow your work, and would love to talk to you again in the not too distant future. Thanks so much, Isaac.
Yeah, most definitely. The pleasure is all mine. Appreciate it.
Later.